All right. This is a very important book. It's been actually driving me totally insane that more people are not aware of this, especially at this time in our history, and people are just losing their minds. Mostly, I would say that's evidenced by the inability to zero in on an appropriate target or understand where these things are coming from, that we're also um, intent on combating, like these toxic vaccines, this false narrative, this nonsense, this propaganda, the election fraud, yada yada yada. It goes on, and people are blaming the Chinese and what, the Democrats. Yeah, I know, I understand, but we have to go to the source. We have to at least try. Otherwise, they're just like holding us at arm's length as we swing wildly, and they're just laughing at us. And I think this book, it's about 15 years old, so keep that in mind. But it's still the best book I've found. There's also Daniel Estolin has done a book on this in Spanish, and you can find other information online. But it's just impossible to understand what's going on unless you understand and know about Tavistock. Come on. So the book is called The Tavistock Institute of Human Relations: Shaping the Moral, Spiritual, Cultural, Political, and Economic Decline of the United States by Dr. John Coleman. And I'm going to, let's see, the foreword, I kind of read through it all. Let's see. Maybe because I'm on, hang on a sec. I'm skipping the foreword because it's all going to be covered in the book proper, and I think the foreword is not written as well, and it's a bit ideological. So, Chapter 1, Founding the World's Premier Brainwashing Institute. From its modest yet vitally important beginning at Wellington House, the Tavistock Institute for Human Relations expanded rapidly to become the world's premier top-secret brainwashing institute. How this rapid progression was accomplished needs to be explained. The modern science of mass manipulation of public opinion was born at Wellington House, London, the lusty infant being midwifed by Lord Northcliffe and Lord Rothmere. The British monarchy, Lord Rothschild and the Rockefellers, were responsible for funding the venture. The papers we were privileged to examine showed that the purpose of those at Wellington House was to effect a change in the opinion of the British people, who were adamantly opposed to war with Germany, a formidable task that was accomplished by opinion-making through polling. The staff consisted of Arnold Toynbee, a future Director of Studies at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, RIIA, Lords Northcliffe, and the Americans Walter Lippmann and Edward Bernays. Bernays was born in Vienna on November 22, 1891, as the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, regarded by many as the father of public relations, although the title probably belongs to Willy Munzenberg. Bernays pioneered the use of psychology and other social sciences to shape and form public opinion so that the public thought such manufactured opinions were their own. Quote, "If we understand the mechanism and motive of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it," Bernays postulated. He called this technique engineering consent. One of his best-known techniques of achieving this goal was the indirect use of what he called third-party authorities to shape the desired opinions. Quote, "If you can influence the leaders, either with or without their conscious cooperation, you automatically influence the group which they sway." This technique he called opinion-making. Perhaps we can now begin to understand how it was that Wilson, Roosevelt, Clinton, Bush the elder and younger, could so easily lead America into disastrous wars in which its people should never have become involved. The joint British and American participants concentrated their efforts on techniques as yet not tried out to mobilize support for the war looming on the horizon. As previously stated, the British people did not want war, and said so, but Toynbee, Lippmann, and Bernays expected to change that by applying techniques designed to manipulate public opinion through the use of polling. Herein, we provide a review of the methods that were devised and executed to bring Great Britain and the United States into the First World War, plus the techniques that were put into practice between the two wars and beyond. As will be seen, propaganda was to play a major role. One of the main objectives at Tavistock was to achieve the degradation of women. Tavistock recognized that Jesus Christ had brought a new place of respect in the order of civilization to womanhood, which prior to his coming had not been present. After Christ's ministry, womanhood gained a respect and a high place in society absent from pre-Christian civilizations. Of course, it can be argued that such elevated status existed in the Greek and Roman empires, and that would be true to a certain extent, but not to the extent that womanhood was elevated in post-Christ society. Tavistock sought to change that, and the process began immediately after World War I. The Eastern Orthodox Church, which the Rus, Viking princes of Moscow, brought back from Constantinople, revered and respected womanhood, and their experience with the Khazarians, whom they subsequently defeated and drove out of Russia, left them determined to protect womanhood in Russia. The founder of the Romanov Dynasty, Michael Romanov, was the scion of a noble family that had defended Russia on the basis of a Christian country. From 1613, the Romanovs sought to ennoble Russia and imbue it with a great spirit of Christianity, which meant also protection for and the honoring of Russian womanhood. The princes of Moscow under Prince Dmitry Donskoy earned the unremitting hatred of the Rothschilds for Russia because of Donskoy's defeat and expulsion of the Khazarian hordes that inhabited the lower regions of the Volga. This barbaric warrior nation of mysterious Indo-Turk origin had adopted the Judaic religion on passage of a decree by King Bulant after the religion was approved by the chief Khazarian soothsayer, magician, sorcerer David Elroy. It was Elroy's personal flag, now called the Star of David, that became the official flag of the Khazarian nation when they settled in Poland after being forced out of Russia. The flag was adopted by the Zionists as their standard and is still mistakenly called the Star of David. Christians make the error of confusion, linking it with the Old Testament King David, when in fact there's no relation between the two. The hatred of Russia was compounded in 1612 when the Romanov dynasty led a Russian army against Poland, taking back large parts of Poland that had formerly belonged to Russia. The principal architect of enmity brought to bear against Russia was the Rothschild dynasty, and it was this burning hatred that Tavistock used and channeled in its plan to destroy Western civilization. The first opportunity created by Tavistock came in 1905, with the attack by the Japanese Navy that completely surprised the Russian fleet. The exercise was bankrolled by Jacob Schiff, the Wall Street banker who was related to Rothschild. The defeat of the Russian fleet at Port Arthur in a surprise attack marked the beginning of the pall of gloom that was about to roll in over Christian Europe. The Rockefeller Standard Oil Group, directed by Tavistock and with the aid of the 300, engineered the Russo-Japanese War. The money used to finance the operation came from Jacob Schiff, but was actually provided by the Rockefeller General Education Board, whose outward purpose was to finance Negro education. All the propaganda and advertising for the board was written and crafted by the social scientists at Tavistock, which was then called Wellington House. In 1941, another Rothschild front organization, the Institute for Pacific Relations, IPR, gave large sums to its Japanese counterpart in Tokyo. The money was then funneled to a member of the imperial family by Richard Sorge, a Russian master spy, for the purposes of inducing Japan to attack the United States at Pearl Harbor. Again, Tavistock was the originator of all of IPR's publications. Although it was not yet evident, as Spengler was to mention in his monumental work published in 1936, it marked the beginning of the end of the old order. Contrary to most establishment accounts of history, the, quote, Russian Revolution was not a Russian revolution at all, but a foreign ideology backed by the Committee of 300 and its arm, the Tavistock Institute, that was violently forced upon a startled and unprepared and dismayed Romanov family. It was political warfare, low-grade warfare, and psychological warfare in which Tavistock had become well-versed. As Winston Churchill was to remark, quote, "They transported Lenin in a sealed truck like a plague bacillus from Switzerland into Russia. And then, once established, Lenin and Trotsky seized Russia by the hair of its head." Much has been written, but nearly always in passing, as if it was merely a postscript to history, about the sealed truck, sealed car, sealed train that transported Lenin and his Bolshevik revolutionaries safely through the midst of war-torn Europe and deposited them in Russia, there to begin their imported Bolshevik revolution, so mistakenly termed the Russian Revolution. Documents the author was privileged to study at Wellington House, and what was revealed in the Arnold Toynbee papers and Bruce Lockhart's private papers led to the conclusion that without Toynbee, Bruce Lockhart of MI6, British intelligence, and without the complicity of at least 5 European nations, ostensibly loyal and friendly with the court of St. Petersburg, the merciless Bolshevik Revolution would have been stillborn. As this account must, of necessity, be limited to Tavistock's participation in the affair, it will not be as a complete account of the skullduggery we would have liked to have presented. According to Milner's private papers, his aides through Tavistock contacted a fellow socialist, Fritz Platen. Milner was a leading Fabian socialist, although he scorned Sidney and Beatrice Webb. It was Platen who planned the logistics of the trip and oversaw it until the revolutionaries arrived in Petrograd. This was confirmed and borne out by the Wilhelmstrasse files, the majority of which we were able to gain access to, which files were open to certain people qualified to read them. They tallied fairly closely with Bruce Lockhart's account in his private papers, as well as what Lord Alfred Milner had to say about the underhand affair that betrayed Russia. It appeared that Milner had many contacts among the Bolshevik expatriates, among them Lenin. Let me read that again. It appeared that Milner had many contacts among the Bolshevik expatriates, among them Lenin. It was to Lord Milner that Lenin went when he needed money for the revolution. Armed with a letter of introduction from Platon, Lenin met with Lord Milner and laid down his plan for the overthrow of the Romanovs and Christian Russia. Milner agreed on condition that he could send his agent Bruce Lockhart of MI6 to supervise the day-to-day affairs and report back on Lenin. Lord Rothschild and the Rockefellers demanded that they be allowed to send Sidney Riley to Russia to supervise transfer of Russia's natural resources and the gold rubles held in the central bank to London. This was agreed to by Lenin and later Trotsky. To seal the bargain, Lord Milner, on behalf of the Rothschilds, gave Lenin £60 million in gold sovereigns, while the Rockefellers contributed around $40 million. Countries in complicity with the sealed train affair were Great Britain, Germany, Finland, Switzerland, and Sweden. While the United States was not directly involved, it must have been aware of what was going on. After all, on the orders of President Wilson, a brand new American passport was issued to Leon Trotsky, whose real name was Lev Bronstein, so that he could travel in peace, although Trotsky was not a U.S. citizen. Lenin and his compatriots were provided with a private, well-appointed rail carriage by the top German government functionaries and always kept locked by agreements with stations along the line. Platon was in charge, and he laid down the rules for the trip, some of which are listed in the Wilhelmstrasse files. The carriage was to remain locked for the entire trip. No one could board the carriage without Platon's permission. The train would have extraterritorial status. No passports were asked at the borders. Tickets would be bought at regular prices. No security issues to be raised by the military or police of any country en route. According to the Wilhelmstrasse files, the trip was authorized and approved by General Ludendorff and Kaiser Wilhelm. Ludendorff went so far as to say that if Sweden refused to let the Bolsheviks pass, he would guarantee them passage into Russia through the German lines. As it turned out, the Swedish government raised no objection, and neither did the Finnish government. One of the notable revolutionaries who joined the train when it arrived at the German frontier with Switzerland was Radek, who was to play a leading role in the bloody Bolshevik Revolution. There were some lighter moments, too. The Wilhelmstrasse files describe how the carriage missed its engine at Frankfurt, resulting in it being shunted to and fro for about 8 hours. The party had to detrain in the German Baltic town of Sassnitz, where they were accorded decent accommodation by the German government. The Swedish government kindly gave them ferry transport to Malmö, from where they sailed to Stockholm, where nice accommodation awaited the Bolshevik party for an overnight layover, and then it was on to the Finnish border. There, the intrepid Platon left the high-spirited party and the final journey into Russia and made by train to Petrograd. Thus, an epic journey that began in Zurich, Switzerland, ended in Petrograd. Lenin had arrived on the scene, and Russia was about to be brought low. And throughout, Bernays and Lippmann and their associates at Wellington House, Tavistock, kept up a steady flow of brainwashing propaganda that it is safe to conclude duped much of the world. So, I'll get to chapter 2 next time. It's a lot to take in, and it goes against what a lot of people are so sure they know about that history. So,